Hello there, it's me, Overflow, and today I'm going to be covering Asahi Linux, which is basically running Linux on Apple Silicon. So recently, I got myself an Apple Silicon Mac right here. This one, it's a 14-inch MacBook Pro, and you might have seen my unboxing of another laptop. Unfortunately, that laptop had SSD issues from day one, so I returned it, got this one instead, and now I have an awesome chance to, jump from normal Linux, quote-unquote, to ARM Linux, which I think is a really interesting thing for me to get into, because I've been daily driving Linux for about a year now, but all of them were on x86 with NVIDIA. Now I just kind of want to try something new. So we're going to be installing Apple Silicon today, and I'm just going to be showing you guys a state of what Linux feels like as a daily driver on an ARM chip instead of just, normal x86. So before we start, I'd like to tell you that Asahi Linux is still very much in beta. That means a lot of the features won't be there. And in this video, I will be showing you how you can install the beta GPU drivers. So I just want to go over here and show you some features that you probably won't expect to work. So here I have the MacBook Pro 1416, and a couple things that that doesn't really work here are the HDMI port on this, the USB, I don't actually have any, the speakers, which I don't remember, but I think they work, because I've tried Asahi before. I think they work, but they're just not great, and I'm not going to get microphone support, or webcam support, or Touch ID support, which is expected, because I did T2 Linux before, which is Linux on a T2 MacBook, which is very similar in the terms that they had to, engineer all of Apple's weirdness drivers. So let's get into installing it. Now, I do have to mention of my really janky setup here. So, excuse the jank, because, I don't really have a great way other than screen capture to record video. So, you gotta do what you gotta do. So, let's see if I can move the camera closer to this terminal. Okay, that just absolutely blew out the text. Okay, that looks good enough. So we're gonna go curl alx.sh, and then we're gonna run the sh script. And before we install anything, just a quick reminder that you should probably be backing up your data before you do anything. And I already have, so there we go. Now ask you for your sudo password. That's pretty, common. So welcome to the Asahi Linux installer, alpha state, and press enter. So we're not going to enable expert mode because, so let's see what it printed here. So Pro 14, blah, blah, blah. So it's asking me to partition my drive. So I have a 512 gig drive, so I'm going to have it resize my drive. And then we are going to, let's give it 128 gigabytes out of my 512, so I'd still have, things on macOS to work with, because they're not really recommending you wipe macOS, because first of all, you need it for firmware updates, and second of all, Asahi Linux is not great for full daily driving yet, so it needs to be greater than 360. Please enter values greater than 360.89 gigabytes. That's odd. I don't want to shrink macOS to the minimum, so okay, that's something I've never seen before. Let's visit this link, because maybe Time Machine backups are screwing something up. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, never mind. So, let's do some troubleshooting. I don't want a 3070 split it, so 80 gigabytes to macOS and the rest here. Okay, so I think it's asking for what I want macOS partition to be, so let's give it 384. So then macOS will be 384, and then Linux will be 120. Okay, so that's a little bit confusing. I would personally tell people how the partitioner works, although, of course, Asahi is in development stage, but that is still kind of confusing that you'd have to find out, how the partitioner is going to work. So I'm going to let this partitioner run, and I'm also going to grab the charger, just in case that this computer dies. Yeah, okay, resize complete, press enter to continue. Collecting partition information. Okay, so let's see, free space 110 gigabytes. So let's install an OS into there, and now we have the install options with the Asahi Linux desktop, Asahi Linux minimal, or UEFI environment only. I'm gonna go with the desktop version, but they're minimal and the desktop, I believe, are both based on Arch Linux ARM. So that's pretty cool. So we're gonna go with option 1, and then we're just gonna go to Max to just use all of our space. Then Asahi Linux is fine, and we're gonna use macOS 12.3 firmware. So far, I'd like to say that the experience has been a little janky. I'd like it to be slightly more polished, but I think for a release that's not meant for end users to use, it's pretty good so far. Now, in the future, I would love to see, the ability for people to have, like, maybe a GUI environment to set up Asahi Linux, that would be kind of cool, but then again, there are bigger fish to fry, which is an odd term, but yes, there are bigger fish to fry right now in terms of building Linux for the M1 desktops. So while that's going, why not take a look at the Asahi Linux website? So recently, they did get their GPU drivers. That's not the one that I meant to go to. They got GPU drivers in, and yeah. And because their distro is based on Arch Linux ARM, you'll be able to just continuously pick up these new feature drops, which I think is kind of cool, because that means that you could install now, and then, 12 months down the line, when they get full feature upgrades, you could just start up Asahi Linux again, and then get all the new updates without having to reinstall, which is hopefully what they're going to do. So, we have OpenGL in the desktop and the GPU drivers, which is okay for a first beta release. That it's not really meant to be stable, which I think is a pretty recurring theme in this video, that everything's a beta release. So I would love to see Vulkan though, because that's basically where most Linux desktops use. I believe it's either OpenGL, Vulkan for their acceleration. Not quite sure on that, so don't quote me. But with that means that after, they get Vulkan in, then we'll probably have a actually polished desktop environment. So right now, it's just putting everything in there. So you can see they got something like Super TuxCart to run. And then so here's the cool thing, all you have to do is just SYU, and then you can just install the new drivers. So, and of course there's also screen tearing, because, Wayland, vsync, blah blah blah. Beta package. So, yep. I think at this point we're gonna speed it up. If anything interesting happens, I'll tell you. Okay, so it seems like the installer did something. So, let's switch out of telephoto. I'm gonna put in my password. Okay, so it's going to set the new OS as the default boot volume. Okay, so it has some instructions that, kind of scream if you don't do it correctly, you're gonna break your computer. So please read the following instructions. Failure to do so will leave your new installation in an unbootable state. So let's press enter. So we have to shut down the computer, and then we hold the power button to power on the system. Then get into the startup options, choose Asahi Linux, and then go into the prompts. Okay, so I'm going to stop my OBS recording because I can't screen capture. One of the reasons is because, of course, there is no screen capturing because there's like no GPU drivers. B, I really want to screen cap the macOS recovery thing, and that's probably not going to happen. So that's where the phone comes in, and you'll get to see this wonderfully janky 4K phone setup. So I think now that the system is powered down, I'm going to press and hold for 15 seconds. Okay, go on. Options. Okay. Now we're loaded in to the startups option. I will say that this is a lot slower than the option menu that was in x86 Macs. So we're going to boot into Asahi Linux. This brings us to macOS recovery, which I believe it's actually going to ask us to enter a password or something. So, of course, this installation takes a lot longer because there is no, main UEFI bootloader for ARM, which makes the process a lot harder. So I think it's installing its own bootloader and then, installing things. So I'm going to bring you guys back because I had to enter in a password. Let's bring this down a little bit. Be prompted for login credentials. Okay, and move you guys aside again so I can enter the login. So, of course, it tells you that it's not meant to be in production environments. Luckily, I don't really depend on this MacBook. If I did have an issue, I could just roll back with Time Machine. And that's what I did, in fact, the last time I installed Asahi Linux. So, I just already had a Time Machine backup, so I just rolled back, wiped macOS, reinstalled. It wasn't much of a hassle, actually, which is something that's actually pretty nice about this installation. So are you sure you want to do this? Yes. So my username, Henry. Put in my password. Okay, installation complete. So we press enter to reboot. Let's pull you guys back into widescreen. And now we're booting into Asahi Linux with its fancy little colors and the things. So, U-boot is starting. I'm try and adjust this so you get to see the whole screen. There is this very tiny grub interface. So we're just going to have it boot default. Okay, and you might notice, first thing is that we have the top bezel here. That's because Linux doesn't really know how to handle a notch, so Asahi just chose to cut the top off and just pretend, since the notch actually gives you extras, this is a normal 16:10 display, and this is just extra space afforded by the notch, which I think is pretty cool that you're not actually losing anything. So we're going to set our time zone to Chicago, so I'm going to click around like an idiot until I get it. And Apple Aluminum Seems like it works. Okay, hold on. So another odd thing is that you can't move the mouse while you type. So let me show you. Okay, so you can see while I'm typing and I'm trying to like move the trackpad, it doesn't work. That's a little bit of an oddity. So I'm gonna call this Henry. Then I'm going to choose a password. So now you guys can go and stare at this wonderful wallpaper in the back. Okay, so back in with the installer. And of course, this is Arch with an installer, which, you know, some prestigious people might start screaming because you're not supposed to use Arch with an installer, but it's a whatever. So now it's gonna take me to a very old, non-breeze looking SDDM, so I'm gonna log in again. Okay, so now we're in our KDE Plasma desktop, and the first thing that I noticed is that none of KDE's transparency and like animations are working, so that might be because we need to install some drivers. So let's pop open console. So then do a sudo pacman-syu, punch in our password, and we forgot to connect to the internet. So I believe this does come with internet drivers automatically, which is awesome, because back then on T2 Linux, you know, only some distros came with Wi-Fi by default, and without Wi-Fi, it's a pain to use Linux. In fact, I'd say that if you don't have Linux internet, just don't use Linux, because so much of it comes from external downloads that it'll be painful. So it seems like they already set up parallel downloads for me, so there we go. Let's pull in some updates. And not having the notch, okay, let's take this. Not having the notch is still kind of mildly annoying, but it's a whatever. So let's see. So yes, even outside, you can't move the trackpad when you're typing. So that's mildly annoying. Let's remove the Firefox flow. Also, it feels like the desktop is really zoomed out. So trackpad multi-touch is actually pretty good. So input devices, touchpad. Yeah, okay. Let's go into the display. So it identifies correctly as a 3024 by 1890 display, which is 16 by 10. There is no ProMotion, so here we go. There is no ProMotion yet, and I'm not going to put it at 150 because these displays are actually really good at either 200 or 175 resolution, because, you know, this is the way that Apple engineers the display. They target a specific PPI, pixels per inch, instead of an actual resolution. So we're going to let the update finish, but at the same time, I'm also going to pull up Asahi Linux's website. So of course, first thing that you do when you have a new Firefox install is that you install uBlock Origin. So it's actually decently snappy for just web browsing. Like, it is surprisingly snappy. It doesn't really feel like it's sluggish, unlike something like the Raspberry Pi. So let's go into ALX.sh, just redirects to Asahi Linux. So if we go into the check out the announcements, I will enable smooth scrolling on Firefox later. So not this one. You want to install the GPU drivers. So we're already running SYU, so we'll let SYU finish, and then we're going to get the Asahi Linux Edge kernel and their Mesa Asahi Edge, and then we're going to run update grub. Okay. Well, one of the wonderful things about using the phone is that I can do the zoom in without having to do it in DaVinci Resolve. That's kind of cool, because it saves me a little bit of work at the end, but that still means that I have to do all the fancy speeding up and stuff. And since this came with Plasma by default, I'm also going to try GNOME later on, because GNOME on laptops is pretty good. You can see a lot of screen tearing here. Okay, well, they stopped screen tearing. Oh, if you can see it, but there we go. If you do big movements with Windows, there's screen tearing. You can even see it on video, and I don't have to slow it down. So while that's running, let's see what actually works. So let's pop open to YouTube. Center, and then let's play, see if Crab Rave works. I'm gonna skip the starting point. Yep, there's no sound. Thought the speakers work in progress meant that, it was not great, but they worked, but I guess they don't. And another thing that I find is pretty funny is that the screen resolution is binary on-off. Oops, and now it's not coming back on, which is awesome. Very great release. So, I believe that's something else that the newer kernel fixes, the screen brightness being binary. Because this is just full brightness. Like, if you try and use it at night, it's going to sear your eyes with the HDR, 1600 nits peak brightness. So let's see. Let's pull up an HDR's 4K 60 FPS and see if HDR works. So currently this is at 480p, so let's bump this up to 2160. And it doesn't have an HDR option, which sucks. So it doesn't look like the things are much brighter than anything else. So it looks like HDR isn't working, but 4K 60 decode. So let's put up stats for nerds. 4K 60, we have dropped 58 frames. So it's not perfect, but it's good enough that you'd actually be able to watch it. So now let's install the GPU drivers. So sudo pacman-s, Linux Asahi Edge, and the Mesa Asahi Edge drivers. That's something Control Shift V. Okay. Sorry, I have to mess around with the keyboard shortcuts because they're just different every package. So, okay. It's asking if we want to remove the old Mesa. Yes. Yes. So we're going to have that installed. And now, so let's run sudo update grub and sudo pacman-s plasma Wayland session. We're going to run that. And while we're at it, let's change the STDM theme to Breeze, because sometimes the devs don't do it properly. So now let's sudo reboot, and let's check out boot times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, so it was really fast from Grub to login screen, but it was mild. But the U-boot, all the other stuff that they had to add on, probably slowed it down a lot. Okay, and now with GPU drivers, you can see that the blur is working, which is awesome. The blur is one of my favorite things about KDE Plasma, and the fact that it works now is great. So let's resize this window. Okay, hold on. Is this Plasma? Oh. About the system, this is still running on X11, so, I guess the new GPU drivers work on X11 too. I thought they told us that it only worked on Wayland. So let's log in again, but this time on Wayland. And first thing is the brightness is no longer binary on off, which is awesome. So brightness works. Let's make sure that this is slightly smaller, because nobody really uses the panel that big. Okay. So the icons are still a little goofy. I really don't know what's up with that. Okay, let's set it to 38, because that doesn't make the icons goofy. Okay. So this is all of this so far is just normal like Linux scaling issues. I don't think it's has to do with Asahi. So I don't know why the icons are being kind of goofy because they don't look right. Okay, about the system, Wayland. So do the gestures work? Okay, the gestures work. They're still a little, they're plasma gestures, which means that they're really janky. To undo your gesture before you do the same thing, which I think is really weird. Like, so first you swipe 4 fingers up to get to this screen, and then natural intuition is that you swipe 4 fingers down to get rid of this, but no, you swipe 4 fingers up again. You swipe 4 fingers down, it brings up this screen, which I think is kind of odd, but 3-finger gestures work the same way that you'd expect. So let's open a Firefox, and it seems to lose my Wi-Fi again. So let's shrink this. So let's connect this. Didn't automatically connect, which is weird. Give it a refresh. So 4K, no HDR, stats for nerds. It's dropping, it has dropped 6 frames so far, so it's dropping less frames, but it's still dropping frames. So I guess that's okay. We do have full plasma blur. And finally, I want to try out FlatHub on ARM. So let's get console out. Let's pin to task manager. Sudo pacman -as flatpak. Yes. Okay, and ARM on flat pack Reddit. I do have to search this up. I forgot there is a command, this one, that I was looking for that shows the amount of Flatpak packages that are available on ARM. So let's copy this and put it into here. Okay, we forgot to install a remote, so let's pull up FlatHub, click setup, and I believe we could just use the normal. Okay, that wasn't very helpful. Let's try the Fedora one. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Copy. Control-Shift-V. Okay, Flatpak read. ARM64. So, nothing so far. Let's give it a reboot to make sure that it's not like, first time that we installed Flatpak. So, here's the thing. If we don't have any Flatpak apps on ARM64 or ARM, that's going to be kind of disappointing, because that's majority of where the apps that I use come from. So you're going to have to use system binaries, which might not be the best. So it's taking forever to shut down, just like systemd always does. Let's just power button it. Okay, so if we skip the Asahi bootloader thing, see how long, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to get into desktop is not bad. So let's try this command again. So overall, it does feel pretty snappy. As in, like, it doesn't feel like it's having to do any like weird tricks. So I believe it's remote ls. I'm gonna have to look up the Reddit thread again, because I really do want to see how many things are there for Flatpak ARM. So Flatpak remote ls -- arch equals ARM. So apparently there's nothing. So let's try to install Discord. You know, pretty common thing that people want to install. So there is no Discord. Okay. So sudo nano /attic /pacman.conf. So let's take a look at the repositories it use. So we might have to change it to arch64. You know, the proper way to read it, arch64. So you can use color. Then we're gonna bump parallel downloads to 10 because I like to live on the edge. So Asahi Core Extra Community Alarm AUR. So I guess it has AUR by default. No, flatmake.com. Yep, yes, clear. Okay, so let's try that again, but with the correct architecture. So with Arch64 or Arch64, we actually have some proper packages. So let's see what we have. So scrolling to the top, because this UI is kind of unintuitive, and I guess that's the end of what they have. Okay, so let's see. Flatpak install Discord. No. Okay, so there is no ARM64 Flatpak for Discord. But I do know that there is a VS Code one, and, you know, all the Rust developer toolchains. But with that, you know, the epic failure, I think that's going to be the end of this video. I am going to be using this more and try and daily driver this-ish to find out what the actual thing is. And I think I'm going to report back, because this was generally a first impressions video, and I'm going to report back later. So with that, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!